Everyone thought Billionaire's fiancée was paralyzed, until the maid pushed her. "Push me faster, you clumsy girl, or I'll make sure you never work in this town again." Victoria Sinclair screamed the words from her wheelchair, diamonds flashing in the sun, as the maid's hands trembled on the handles. Nobody knew the truth hiding behind that silk-red dress and that sad, fragile smile. Nobody knew what Maya Johnson had seen 3 nights ago, in the dark, at the top of the stairs. Some secrets are heavier than wheelchairs, and some lies are about to fall apart in front of everyone watching. Welcome back, friends, to another emotional journey that will touch your heart. Today's story is filled with betrayal, hidden secrets, heartbreak, and a twist you will never see coming. This is a tale about greed, kindness, and the courage it takes to tell the truth even when everyone believes a lie. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, what country are you watching from? Now let's begin this unforgettable story. She smiled for the cameras, but behind closed doors, her cruelty had no limits. Nathaniel Cole was one of the most respected businessmen in Charleston, South Carolina. He built his real estate empire from nothing, starting with a single fixer-upper house he bought with his father's retirement savings. By the time he was 38, his name was on office towers, luxury apartment complexes, and half the waterfront properties along the Ashley River. But none of that mattered to him as much as the woman he loved. 3 years ago, Nathaniel met Victoria Sinclair at a charity gala. She wasn't from money back then. She grew up in a modest 2-bedroom house in Columbia, raised by a single mother who worked double shifts as a hospital nurse. Victoria used to volunteer at homeless shelters on weekends. She used to give her lunch away to classmates who couldn't afford one. Everyone who knew her back then remembered a warm, humble girl with a gentle laugh and a heart big enough to hold the whole world's pain. But the world Nathaniel introduced her to was different. It was a world of yachts and private jets, of country clubs and designer gowns, of people who measured your worth by the size of your bank account. First, Victoria felt out of place. She would whisper to Nathaniel at parties, "These people are so cold. I don't know if I belong here." Nathaniel would hold her hand and tell her she belonged wherever he was. Slowly that changed. Victoria's new circle of friends, women named Camille, Bitsy, and Charlotte, began filling her head with poison disguised as advice. "Honey, you can't let the staff see you as an equal," Camille told her over mimosas one morning. "They'll walk all over you," Bitsy added. "Being kind to people below your station just makes them think they can take advantage of you." Victoria laughed it off the first few times. But words repeated often enough begin to feel like truth. Her mother noticed the change before anyone else. During a rare visit, she watched Victoria snap at a waiter for bringing the wrong wine. "That's not who I raised," her mother said quietly in the car afterward. Victoria rolled her eyes. "Mom, things are different now. I have a reputation to protect." Her mother's eyes filled with tears, but Victoria didn't see them. She was already checking her phone, replying to a message from Camille about a dress fitting. 2 years into their relationship, tragedy struck. Victoria was in a car accident on a rainy night, returning from a gala. The doctors said her spine suffered severe trauma. She would need a wheelchair, possibly for the rest of her life. Nathaniel was devastated. He cancelled 3 months of business trips to be by her hospital bed every single day. He held her hand through physical therapy sessions that left her crying in frustration. He redesigned an entire wing of his mansion to be wheelchair accessible, installing ramps, wider doorways, and a custom elevator, all before she even came home. "I will never leave you," Nathaniel whispered to her one night in the hospital. "Whatever happens, we face it together." Victoria smiled weakly and squeezed his hand. But something strange flickered behind her eyes, something Nathaniel was too in love to notice. 6 months after the accident, Maya Johnson was hired as a live-in housekeeper at the Cole estate. Maya was 26 years old, originally from Savannah, Georgia. She had moved to Charleston after her father passed away, taking care of her 2 younger siblings while working 2 jobs to keep their small apartment. When the housekeeping position at the Cole mansion opened up, paying nearly triple what she made at her previous job, Maya felt like her prayers had been answered. On her first day, Maya was nervous. The mansion was larger than any building she had ever worked in. Marble floors, chandeliers, a private garden with rose bushes taller than she was. She was introduced to Victoria in the sunroom, where Victoria sat in her wheelchair, sipping tea from a porcelain cup. "You must be the new girl," Victoria said, not looking up from her phone. "Try not to break anything. The last one broke a vase worth more than your yearly salary." Maya swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am. I'll be careful." Victoria finally looked up, scanning Maya from head to toe with a look of cold appraisal. "Good. Now push me to the study. I have a headache and these wheels are impossible on this rug." As Maya gripped the handles of the wheelchair for the first time, she had no idea that this simple act would eventually unravel a secret that would shake the entire Cole family to its core. That night, exhausted after her first shift, Maya sat in her small staff quarters and called her younger sister. "It's a beautiful house," she said softly, "but something about that woman gives me a strange feeling. I can't explain it yet. It's just a feeling." Little did she know, that feeling was about to become the center of one of the most shocking discoveries of her life. Every day, the cruelty grew a little sharper, and every night, Maya's suspicion grew a little stronger. Weeks turned into months, and Maya settled into her routine at the Cole estate. She woke before sunrise to prepare breakfast, cleaned every room until it sparkled, and pushed Victoria's wheelchair from room to room like clockwork. At first, she tried to convince herself that Victoria's coldness was simply the result of her suffering. Being paralyzed at such a young age would break anyone's spirit, Maya reasoned. Maybe cruelty was just how Victoria processed her pain. But the cruelty never stopped, and it never seemed to come from pain. Came from something else entirely. One afternoon, Maya was setting the table for lunch when she overheard Victoria on the phone with Camille. "Nathaniel's mother wants to invite the Hendersons to the engagement party," Victoria said, examining her manicured nails. "Can you believe that? The Hendersons made their money in used car dealerships." "Used cars, Camille. I told Nathaniel we simply cannot have people like that at our event. It would ruin our image." Maya's stomach turned. She remembered Nathaniel's mother, Eleanor, a kind, elderly woman who had always treated Maya with warmth and respect, always asking about her siblings and remembering small details about her life. Eleanor didn't care about used cars or country clubs. She cared about people's hearts. Later that week, Eleanor visited the estate, moving slowly with her cane, her silver hair pulled into a neat bun. She greeted Maya with a warm hug, something Victoria never did. "How are your little brother and sister doing, dear?" Eleanor asked, remembering details from a conversation weeks earlier. Maya's eyes welled up with tears at the simple kindness. Victoria, watching from across the room, rolled her eyes. "Eleanor, must you fraternize with the staff? It's beneath the family's image." Eleanor turned to her, her expression suddenly serious. "Victoria, kindness is never beneath anyone. I raised my son to know that. I hope for his sake you learn that too." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Victoria forced a smile, but her eyes burned with quiet resentment. That night, Maya was cleaning the hallway near the west wing when she noticed something odd. The door to Victoria's private study was slightly open, and she could hear muffled crying from inside. Curious and concerned, Maya peeked through the crack in the door. What she saw confused her deeply. Victoria was sitting on the floor beside her wheelchair, not in it, her legs stretched out in front of her, sobbing quietly into her hands. Maya's heart pounded. Was this proof that Victoria's coldness was just a mask for deep suffering? She almost knocked on the door to comfort her, but something held her back. Instead, she watched as Victoria wiped her tears, took a shaky breath, and said something to herself that Maya would never forget. "I can't keep doing this," Victoria whispered. "This lie is getting too heavy." Maya froze. What lie? Before she could process what she heard, Victoria hoisted herself back into the wheelchair with surprising ease. Her movements swift and practiced, nothing like the frail, struggling motions Maya had grown accustomed to seeing in front of others. Maya quickly and quietly backed away from the door, her heart racing, her mind spinning with questions she didn't yet have answers to. Over the following days, Maya couldn't shake what she had seen. She began paying closer attention to small details. She noticed that when Victoria thought no one was watching, her posture would straighten. She noticed strength in Victoria's arms that seemed inconsistent with someone who couldn't use her legs. She noticed that sometimes late at night, she heard footsteps coming from Victoria's private wing, soft and quick, footsteps that didn't belong to a wheelchair. Maya told herself she was imagining things. She told herself it wasn't her place to question the family she worked for. But deep in her gut, something didn't sit right. Meanwhile, Nathaniel remained completely devoted to Victoria, unaware of the storm quietly building beneath the surface of his home. He had scaled back his business commitments even further, determined to give Victoria every comfort during what he believed was the most difficult period of her life. He spent his evenings reading to her, massaging her legs during physical therapy exercises the doctors recommended, and planning their wedding, determined to give her a beautiful day despite her condition. "I don't deserve you," Victoria told him one evening, her voice trembling with what appeared to be genuine emotion. "You deserve everything," Nathaniel replied, kissing her forehead gently. "We'll get through this together, and one day you'll walk down the aisle to me. I believe that with my whole heart." Victoria turned her face away so he wouldn't see the conflict written across it. Meanwhile, Maya's discomfort grew heavier by the day. She began confiding in the estate's longtime groundskeeper, an elderly man named Walter who had worked for the Cole family for over 20 years. "Something's not right with Miss Victoria," Maya told him one evening as they sat on the back porch after their shifts. Walter nodded slowly, his weathered face thoughtful. "I've had my suspicions too over the past year. But be careful, Maya. Powerful families don't take kindly to staff who ask too many questions. I've seen people lose their jobs, even their reputations, for less." Maya knew he was right. If she was wrong about what she saw, accusing Victoria of faking her paralysis could destroy her career and her family's financial stability. But if she was right, staying silent meant allowing Nathaniel to be deceived by the woman he trusted most in the world. That night, lying awake in her small staff quarters, Maya made a decision. She needed proof. Real, undeniable proof. And she was determined to find it, no matter the risk to herself. Little did she know, an opportunity to uncover the truth was about to present itself in the most unexpected and dramatic way possible. The truth doesn't always come out quietly. Sometimes it comes out in a moment of chaos nobody could have predicted. The engagement party was set to be the social event of the season. Nathaniel had spared no expense, transforming the estate's grand garden into a breathtaking outdoor venue with white orchids, crystal chandeliers hanging from oak trees, and a string quartet playing softly in the evening air. Over 200 guests were expected, including business partners, extended family, and the elite social circle Victoria had worked so hard to impress. Maya had been assigned to help coordinate the event, ensuring everything ran smoothly. Despite her growing suspicions about Victoria, she pushed her personal concerns aside and focused on doing her job well. The night began beautifully. Nathaniel gave a heartfelt toast about resilience, love, and standing by someone through their darkest moments. Guests wiped tears from their eyes. Victoria, dressed in a stunning silver gown, sat in her wheelchair beside him, smiling gracefully for photographs. But as the evening wore on, something unexpected happened. A small fire broke out near the catering tent, caused by an electrical fault in one of the decorative lighting displays. Within seconds, panic spread through the crowd. Flames licked upward toward the fabric awning, and thick smoke began billowing across the garden. Guests screamed and scrambled toward the exits. Security staff rushed to control the chaos, but the fire spread faster than anyone anticipated. Victoria's wheelchair was positioned near the edge of the tent, dangerously close to the flames. In the chaos, Maya rushed toward her, desperate to push her to safety. But the ground was uneven near the tent's edge, littered with fallen chairs and shattered glassware from the panic. As Maya gripped the wheelchair and pushed hard to maneuver it over the debris, the front wheel caught on a fallen table leg, and the chair tipped forward violently. Time seemed to freeze. Instinctively, without a single moment of hesitation or struggle, Victoria's legs shot out beneath her. She leapt from the tipping wheelchair and landed firmly on both feet, catching her balance perfectly before sprinting 3 full steps away from the flames to safety. The garden fell into a stunned, horrified silence, broken only by the crackling fire and distant sirens approaching. Every single guest who had gathered near the tent, including Nathaniel, Eleanor, and dozens of Charleston's most prominent families, had just witnessed Victoria Sinclair run. Victoria froze, realizing what had just happened. Her eyes darted around at the sea of shocked faces staring back at her. Nathaniel stood motionless, his mouth slightly open, his mind refusing to process what his eyes had just seen. "Victoria," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. You're standing." The silence that followed was heavier than anything Maya had ever experienced. She stood frozen as well, her hands still gripping the tipped wheelchair, realizing that the truth she had suspected for months had just exploded into the open in front of the entire city's elite. Camille, standing nearby with a champagne glass trembling in her hand, whispered to Bitsy, "Oh my God!" Victoria's face cycled through a storm of emotions: shock, panic, and finally, a desperate attempt at damage control. "It's a miracle," she stammered, tears suddenly streaming down her face. The adrenaline, the fear, it must have triggered something. "Nathaniel, I don't know what happened, I just reacted." But Eleanor, standing just a few feet away, was staring at Victoria with an expression that mixed heartbreak and clarity. "Victoria," she said slowly, "I've watched you for over a year. I've seen the way you move when you think no one's looking. I chose to stay quiet because I hoped I was wrong. I prayed I was wrong for my son's sake." The fire was quickly extinguished by the estate security team, but the emotional fire that had just been lit could not be put out so easily. Guests began whispering among themselves, phones quietly recording the unfolding scene despite the chaos. Nathaniel stood in stunned silence, staring at the woman he had planned to spend the rest of his life with, a woman he had sacrificed months of his career and countless sleepless nights caring for. "Everyone, please," Nathaniel finally said, his voice hoarse, turning to address the shocked crowd. "I need everyone to please give my family privacy right now." As guests slowly began filing out of the garden in stunned murmurs, Nathaniel turned to Victoria. His eyes filled with a pain Maya had never seen in him before. 2 years, he said quietly. 2 years I sat by your hospital bed. I changed my entire life for you. I built ramps into my home. I turned down a merger worth $40 million because I couldn't bear to leave your side during your recovery. Was any of it real? Victoria's carefully constructed composure finally shattered completely. She sank to her knees on the grass, sobbing. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she cried. "It started small, Nathaniel. After the accident, I really was hurt, but not as badly as the doctors first thought. When I saw how much attention, how much love and care you gave me, I was terrified that if I got better, things would go back to normal. You'd go back to your business trips, back to being distracted, and I convinced myself that this was the only way to keep you close. Then it just kept growing, and I didn't know how to stop it without losing everything. Maya stood off to the side, still holding onto the overturned wheelchair, watching the devastating scene unfold. Despite everything, despite months of cold treatment and cruelty she had endured from Victoria, she felt no satisfaction in this moment. Only a heavy, complicated sadness for everyone involved. What would you do if you were in Nathaniel's place? The truth had come out, but the hardest conversations were only just beginning. In the days following the engagement party, the story spread like wildfire, not just through Charleston's social circles, but across social media as well. Someone's phone footage of Victoria leaping from her wheelchair had been uploaded online, and within 48 hours, it had millions of views. News outlets picked up the story. Victoria Sinclair became a symbol of deception overnight. Her face plastered across gossip sites with headlines calling her the fake fiancée and Charleston's greatest deception. Victoria retreated from public life entirely, staying locked in a guest room at her mother's modest house, refusing to answer calls from reporters or even from Camille and Bitsy, who suddenly seemed far less interested in associating with her now that her reputation was in ruins. Nathaniel, meanwhile, cancelled the wedding immediately and asked Victoria to move out of the estate. He spent the following week in a fog of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak, questioning every memory of their relationship, wondering how much of it had been genuine and how much had been calculated manipulation. Maya, feeling the weight of everything that had happened, considered resigning from her position. The public attention on the estate had become overwhelming, with reporters occasionally staking out near the property gates. But Eleanor personally asked her to stay. "You didn't cause this, Maya," Eleanor told her gently over tea in the sunroom. "You showed more integrity in this entire situation than anyone else in our circle. Please don't punish yourself for uncovering a truth that needed to come out." Nathaniel, too, sought Maya out privately one evening. He found her in the garden, tending to the rose bushes that Victoria had once complained were too old-fashioned for the estate's aesthetic. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly, sitting on a nearby bench. "For 2 years, I was so absorbed in my own guilt and devotion that I didn't notice what was happening right in front of me. You noticed. You saw the truth long before I did, and I imagine it must have been incredibly difficult carrying that knowledge alone." Maya set down her gardening shears. "It wasn't my place to say anything without proof, Mr. Cole. And honestly, part of me still hoped I was wrong. I know what it's like to struggle, to feel desperate enough to make bad choices. I don't think Miss Sinclair is a monster. I think she got lost somewhere along the way." Nathaniel nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "My mother said something similar. She always believed there was good in Victoria, buried under everything else. I suppose I believed that too, which is why this hurts so much." 2 weeks later, Victoria reached out to Nathaniel, requesting one final conversation. Against his better judgment, and with Eleanor's gentle encouragement, Nathaniel agreed to meet her at a quiet coffee shop away from the public eye. Victoria arrived looking nothing like the polished, image-obsessed woman Charleston society had known. Her hair was simple, her clothes modest, her eyes red from weeks of crying. "I'm not here to ask you to take me back," she said quietly, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. "I know I don't deserve that, and honestly I don't think I deserve your forgiveness either. But I needed to tell you the truth, the whole truth, because you deserve that much after everything I put you through." She explained that her injuries from the accident had actually healed significantly within the first 8 months, confirmed quietly by a specialist she had seen without Nathaniel's knowledge. But by then, she had grown terrified of losing the version of their relationship where she felt like his entire world. She admitted that the influence of her wealthy friends had slowly convinced her that manipulation and image control was simply how people in their social class operated, and somewhere along the way, She stopped recognizing the difference between protecting her relationship and destroying it through dishonesty. "I used to be someone who volunteered at shelters," Victoria said, her voice breaking. "I used to believe kindness mattered more than anything else in the world. I don't know exactly when I lost that person, but I know I want to find her again, even if it means starting completely over, alone." Nathaniel listened silently, his expression unreadable throughout most of her confession. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment before speaking. "I forgive you, Victoria. Not because what you did was acceptable, but because holding on to anger will only poison the rest of my life, and I refuse to let your choices control my future any longer. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. I hope you find your way back to who you used to be. Truly do. But that journey has to happen without me." Victoria nodded, tears streaming silently down her face, and for the first time in years, they weren't tears of manipulation or performance. They were tears of genuine grief for the person she had allowed herself to become. As she walked out of the coffee shop that day, Victoria Sinclair had lost the mansion, the social status, and the fiancé who had once given her everything. But in losing all of it, she had finally been given the opportunity to rebuild herself from the ground up, starting with the truth. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find out who you really are. 6 months passed. Victoria moved back into her mother's small house in Colombia, the same modest 2-bedroom home she had grown up in. At first, the transition was humiliating. She had gone from designer gowns and private chefs to clipping grocery coupons and taking the bus to job interviews that repeatedly rejected her due to her public scandal. But slowly, something inside her began to shift. Her mother, despite everything, welcomed her home with open arms and quiet, patient love. "I never stopped believing you'd find your way back," her mother told her one evening as they sat on the porch, sharing a simple dinner of grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. "The real you never actually disappeared, sweetheart. She was just buried under a lot of noise." Victoria began volunteering again, first hesitantly, at the same homeless shelter she used to visit as a teenager. The staff there didn't recognize her at first without the designer clothes and jewelry, and for the first time in years, she found herself grateful for anonymity. She served meals, folded donated clothing, and sat with elderly residents who simply wanted someone to talk to. Slowly, painfully, she began remembering who she used to be before wealth and status rewrote her identity. 8 months after the scandal, Victoria took a job as an assistant at a small physical therapy clinic, drawn to the work because of her own experience with recovery, even though most of her recovery had been fabricated for far too long. She found genuine purpose in helping actual patients through their real struggles, patients who reminded her daily of the deception she had once perpetrated against people who deserved so much better. Meanwhile, Nathaniel slowly rebuilt his own life. He threw himself back into his business ventures, eventually funding several affordable housing initiatives across Charleston, inspired partly by conversations he'd had with Maya about the financial struggles many working families faced. He and Maya's friendship deepened over the following year, built on a foundation of honesty, mutual respect, and shared values that Victoria's world of image and status had never valued. A year and a half after the scandal, Nathaniel organized a small charity gala, but this one was different from the extravagant parties of his past. It was held at a community center in a working-class neighborhood, raising funds for local families facing housing insecurity. Maya helped him coordinate every detail, and by the end of the evening, watching her laugh with the families they had helped, Nathaniel realized that somewhere along the way, his heart had healed and quietly opened again, this time toward someone whose kindness had never been a performance. As for Victoria, she eventually wrote a letter to Nathaniel, not asking for reconciliation, but simply thanking him for the compassion he'd shown her even during their final conversation, and for indirectly setting her on a path toward rediscovering who she truly was. She mentioned that she had begun speaking, anonymously at first, to local support groups about the dangers of losing yourself to greed, status, and the fear of not being enough. Her story, stripped of names and details, began helping other young women in similar toxic social circles recognize the same patterns before they spiraled as far as she had. Nathaniel read the letter quietly one evening, then folded it and placed it in a drawer. He didn't respond, but he didn't feel angry anymore either. Just a quiet, peaceful closure. 2 years after that fateful night, the fire nearly consumed the engagement tent. Nathaniel proposed to Maya in that very same garden, now replanted with the same old-fashioned rose bushes Victoria had once dismissed as unfashionable. This time there was no performance, no image to protect, no lies hidden beneath silk and diamonds. Just two people who had found each other through truth, integrity, and quiet, steady kindness. Victoria wasn't invited to the wedding, but she sent a small handwritten card that simply read, "I hope your life is filled with everything real." That's all that truly matters in the end. The story of Victoria Sinclair teaches us something powerful. People are not born cruel or selfish. Sometimes the world around us, the pressures, the fear of losing love, the desire for status, slowly reshapes who we are until we no longer recognize ourselves. But it also teaches us that it is never too late to find your way back to your true self, even after losing everything. And for Maya, a humble housekeeper who simply chose honesty over silence, her quiet courage reminds us that integrity, even when it's difficult, even when it puts everything at risk, always matters in the end. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video. It truly helps our channel grow. Subscribe if you'd love more emotional, inspiring stories like this one. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that it's never too late to find their way back to who they really are. And please tell us in the comments, what part of this story moved you the most? We read every single comment, and we can't wait to hear from you. Until next time, take care of your heart, and never lose sight of who you truly are.